Welcome in, Kingdom family. I pray this Wednesday finds you blessed and excited right here before it all begins on Friday night with our Good Friday communion service, and then two services at 5 and 7 on Saturday night with the 4 o'clock Easter egg hunt, and then three services on Sunday. It is going to be an incredible resurrection weekend for each and every one of us. I pray you're getting excited. I pray you're opening the door of invitation to your friends and family and coworkers and neighbors, getting somebody that needs to know Jesus into the house as we declare there is more to the story. And I believe that with all of my heart, that there is more to each of our stories than sometimes the pain and the disappointment and the dysfunction that we walk through in our lives. That God sent his son, that each of us could really rewrite our stories as we go forward. And I just believe that this weekend, God is going to rewrite so many stories, especially in those two Saturday night services, 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Get somebody in those services with you. And I believe it's going to be just an incredible weekend. And I'm not going to keep you long tonight, but I want to draw your attention to a group of scriptures in Exodus, the 23rd chapter, really verse 14 all the way down through verse 30. I'm not going to cover them, but I do want to give you 7 promises that are found here in Exodus chapter 23 for those who observe the commanded feasts of the Lord. He says there in verse number 14, he says there's 3 times a year where every male has to get before the Lord. They've got to make the journey to Jerusalem to celebrate these 3 important feasts, which are the Feast of Passover, and then the Feast of Pentecost, and then in the fall, our fall, the Feast of Tabernacles. He said 3 times a year you're going to appear before the Lord and observe these feasts. And he says, when you come, do not come empty-handed. Now, if you obey and you come with an offering, he said there are 6 promises that I want to make, and I want you to stir your heart up with these over the next few minutes as I put these in your heart. 7 promises that you need to begin to declare over your life, over your family, as we observe this Passover season and the sowing of a resurrection seed. There are 7 things I want to declare from God's word over you and your family. What an exciting time of miracles as our faith is stirred to believe that because he lives, we can live also, that dead dreams are coming back to life, that marriages are coming back together, that young people in our families are finding their way back to the cross. It's a season of the miraculous, and I want to stir your faith tonight, right there in your living room, hopefully with your children gathering, because it is going to be brief. I want you to stir your faith, inspect your seed, get ready, because I believe God is going to do extraordinary, miraculous, supernatural things in our lives, in your life, and in your family. And Pastor Steph and I are standing with you. I want to know, what are you believing for? What are you standing in faith for? And does your seed represent your need? But I want to declare these things over you because I just believe this is going to be a season where you recognize and realize the promise and presence of God like never before. God told the Israelites, he said, I want you to observe these 3 feasts. And when you come, don't come empty-handed. Come with an offering. And if you do, these are 7 promises, 7 blessings, 7 supernatural occurrences that I am going to release into your life. And the first one is found there in verse number 20. He said, I'm going to send an angel before you. I'm going to assign an angel to your life. Let me tell you something. You may not know what tomorrow is, but you do know that you're not facing it by yourself. There is angelic intervention for the people of God. He said, I'm going to release and assign an angel to your life. I'm going to tell you something. If we could ever get a real vision of what angels look like, we'd have an increase in courage knowing that God has assigned to us an angel, a ministering spirit, a helpmate in our lives in this season of Passover. Secondly, there in verse number 22, he says, I'm going to be an enemy to your adversaries. I'm going to be an enemy to your enemies. Isn't it something we know we have adversaries? We know we have pushback and tests and trials that you and I walk through, and some of them very painful. Some of you right now are walking through incredibly painful situations in your life, health, family, marriage, finances, whatever it might be. But I want to declare of you, and I sense the presence of the Lord in the studio today. I want to tell you that you may have an enemy, but God says in this season, as you appear before me with an offering in your hand, I will be an enemy to your enemies. Thirdly, there in verse number 25, he says, I am going to give you increase. I'm going to bless your bread and water. I'm going to give you a season of increase. I wonder how many of you out there would raise your hand if I said you're ready for a season of increase. And I want you to know what Pastor Steph and I are believing in terms of our increase more than anything is that we would have an increased presence of God in our house in this season. I believe we're going to feel the weight of the increase. What are you believing God to increase in this season? What is your faith out there touching the hem of his garment, demanding, Lord, I need increase? Increase in my home, in my marriage, in my finances, in my physical body. I need increase in the anointing and the call over my life that I may accomplish your will. I'm going to assign you an angel. I'm going to be an enemy to your enemies, and I will send you a season of increase. And there, right in the same verse number 25 of Exodus 23 says, I will take sickness away from the midst of you. Oh, I want to know, have you been sick in your body? Maybe it's sick in your mind, sick in your spirit. Wherever illness or disease or malady or malfunction is operating in your life, I am going to take sickness from the midst of thee. I believe this Easter, this resurrection seed, as we put a seed in the ground, as we recognize that he is not here, but he is risen with the keys of death, hell, and the grave in his hand, I believe there is going to be a release of healing like we've never experienced it. In fact, I believe this Friday night, as we gather to receive the Lord's communion and celebrate Good Friday, because it was a Good Friday. It's not a funeral service. It is a service of absolute victory. But I believe this, as we receive the Lord's communion, there is going to be a release of healing. Maybe you don't need physical healing, but you need healing on the inside, wounds from the past. God said, if you stand before me in this season of Passover with an offering in your hand, he said, I will remove sickness from the midst of you. That was number 4. Number 5 is there in verse number 26. He said, the number of your days I will fulfill. He said, I'm going to lengthen the days of your life. Now, I want to tell you something. God is going to redeem the time for you and I. You feel like you wasted time? God says, no. No, when you get in step and in rhythm, I will extend your days. I am going to give you a long and a prosperous life. And I think that is an incredible promise for each and every one of us. The 6th promise of Passover is located there in verse number 30. He said, I'm going to give you an inheritance. You're going to be increased until you inherit the land of promise. Man, my heart leaps at this. I don't know about you, but I don't want anything that is not for me or promised to me. But I do want everything that is in my inheritance. Now, I want to talk to you today that have felt a little bit like you've been left out, like you're by yourself, like you've never really possessed the promise or been fulfilled in your experience with God. I want to declare over you, this is a resurrection seed where God is going to talk to you about your inheritance. And the chief part of that inheritance is life eternal. And I believe that this coming weekend, God's going to envelop us in a level of life. He said, I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. This is the year where that door of abundance opens over you and your family, and you realize and take possession of your inheritance in God. And then lastly, back up in verse number 29, he said, I'm going to give you a special year of blessing, a special year of favor. I don't know about you, but I love the favor of the Lord. I say it often, but one moment's favor is better in my life than 50 years of labor. God said, I'm going to give you a year that is crowned with good. I don't know about you, but I want the rest of 24. I want it to be crowned with the special blessing, the special favor. That doesn't mean I won't be without struggles. That doesn't mean I won't cry some tears, that I won't face disappointment, that things in my life don't get rocky. It just means that if it does, there will be a peace and a joy and a strength to navigate those. I think when we think about the blessing of the Lord, sometimes we don't understand the packages that blessing shows up in. I've had some hard times end up being some of the best blessings I ever had, because in those moments we learn more than we lose. We grow more than we're destroyed. And I believe this to be, in the year of the open door, a year where we respond to God and coming before him and recognizing this season of Passover with an offering in our hand, that we too are going to see the same kind of harvest in our life, a harvest of angelic assignment, a harvest of God being an enemy to our enemies, a harvest of increase, a harvest of healing in our lives, a harvest of long life in front of us, a harvest of supernatural favor and blessing from the Lord. I believe all of those things can be and will be released into the hearts of the people of faith. What a weekend it is to celebrate what God has done, to rejoice in what we know he will do. What are you believing him for? What are you bringing in your hand? What level of faith are you exempling in the offering you place before him? Because he's given us a promise right here in Exodus chapter 23, that if we do respond, and we respond in faith, and no, the giving of a resurrection seed is not an offering. I think a lot of times in our humanity, we can look at these things. And some of you've had bad experiences or whatever the case may be that cause us to be skeptical. This is about your giving example of faith, and faith moves mountains. What are you believing for? I want to pray with you here in just a moment. I want to encourage your heart. What a season it is. What possibilities are present in this season? What potential are hidden in Friday and Saturday and Sunday of the death and the burial and the resurrection of our Lord Jesus? What victory we are to celebrate on Easter weekend. I know sometimes it can feel like, at least it does to me as a pastor, that we have so secularized these holy moments. This is not a secular holiday. This is our holy day. This is a day we celebrate his triumphant rise over death and hell and the grave. This is the weekend that our faith in God was crystallized, as up from the grave he arose triumphant over his foes. And here's the beauty in all of that, that because he got up, you and I have the strength to get up in newness of life as well. I believe that God is going to rewrite some stories. You say, but Pastor, you don't understand what kind of the first part of this year it's been. What kind of the last 5 years it's been. All of that may be true, but what's also true is this, that on the third day, despite the skeptics and the pushback and the attempt of the adversary to drown his plan for humanity, he still got up, and so will you. He still arose with victory, and so will you. Pastor Steph and I are standing with you every step of this. We feel so passionate in this year of the open door that the season of miracles God is about to bring us into will astonish us all, along with these 7 blessings and promises out of Exodus 23 as we observe his feast by faith with an offering in our hand. It shall come to pass. Father, I thank you today. I sense your presence right now on this Wednesday night. I ask you to reach right into homes and cars, offices, living rooms, wherever they may be, watching me right now, that faith and hope and expectation would fill their hearts. They would be preparing their seed to stand before the King, knowing that as we attach faith to our sacrifice, that you have promised us angelic assignment, that you would be an enemy to our enemies, that you would give us increase, that you would take sickness from our bodies, that we would have long life, that you would give us an inheritance and give us a special year of your blessing and favor. May each and every one of those things chase us down, overwhelm us, and as they do, we're going to stand and give testimony of the goodness and the favor and the blessing of the Lord. Steph and I love you. I want to encourage you about this Easter weekend. Get in God's house. I know next week is spring break and some of you are moving out. If that's the case, stay long enough to get in a service Saturday night and jump out of town on Sunday morning. Whatever the case, bring somebody with you. Get folks in this 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock Saturday night. Let's see the greatest harvest weekend in terms of souls we've ever seen in one weekend in the history of our church. It takes you for that to be accomplished. But I believe the victory on the other side. Oh, I believe in the victory on the other side. I sure do love you, and I can't wait to see you this coming Friday night at 7 o'clock. God bless you, Kingdom family.
Kingdom family, it's almost here, the day we've all been waiting for, the day the stone gets rolled away and death gets swallowed up in victory, the day the Father's seed arose to speak life to every generation that would follow. And because he lives, you and I shall live also. This season has always captured my heart and imagination, that the God of the heavens would love humanity so deeply that he would sacrifice his only son that you and I could receive life. It touches me so very deeply. Who am I that he would surrender his seed to the ground? Who am I that Jesus would humble himself and walk the Via Dolorosa carrying his own cross so that he could lift the burden of sin from off my shoulders? What an amazing truth. What a glorious salvation. The fact of the matter is, this was the only way. This was the step that must be taken to secure his bride for eternity. This was the only way, because to receive a harvest, a seed must be sown. Even Jesus, when faced with the realities of the step he was asked to take, asked the Father, isn't there another way? And so often when the step is difficult and it calls us to sacrifice, we want to find another way. When God led the children of Israel out of Egyptian bondage, he promised that he would give them a land that flowed with milk and honey. He promised them houses they didn't build, vineyards they didn't plant, and wells that they did not dig. God's heart for his people was that they live in a place of abundance. But in Joshua chapter 1, he lets them know that there were steps that had to be taken. He makes it clear that the promise was dependent on the steps. When it comes down to it, we all have to answer the question, what steps are we willing to take? Their steps would lead them to the front door of their greatest opposition. Our obedience can often lead us to places that are very difficult and even discouraging. The walls of that fortress at Jericho seemed to reach all the way to the sky. It looked like an impossible situation, but when you take the appropriate steps, it opens the door for for you to receive the promise of God. On Easter Sunday morning, we're going to take a step that will open the door of abundance over your life and family. We're going to sow a resurrection seed that will break the back of lack in your life. I want to know, are you ready and willing to take the step? Are you ready to step through the door of abundance into the very promise of God? Stephanie and I are praying for you as you prepare to sow. We want to join our faith with yours, and we cannot wait to step into promise with each of you.